Hi everyone, it's Professor Doherty here, and of course the dog is barking upstairs. So what I want to talk about here is my PhD journey, how I got a PhD, and tell you about the process because it's quite strange how I got mine, and maybe it'll inspire you to get a PhD, although I don't recommend that, and that'll be a video coming out soon. Alright, so what do you need to get a PhD? There's quite a lot of different things. Of course, this is going to vary depending on the area. I'm computer science / math, but mainly computer science. It could be different for all the humanities. It could be different within an institution too, even within a field. So the journey that people will take really is a case-by-case basis. It does not really have a set way of doing things. There are certain rules that you have to go by in order to be granted a PhD, of course. And that'll vary, of course, by institution, but generally it's the case that you have to do some specific things, but generally it's going to be different depending on the individual. It's a case-by-case thing. All right, so I have all my notes below me, so hopefully I can do this in one take. So the first thing that I did to lay the foundation for all this is I was in the Barrett Honors College at Arizona State University. So essentially this is just saying you get the word honors on your diploma for your bachelor's, and that's it. All this extra work for the word honors on your diploma. But anyway, so one of the requirements to be an honors graduate is that you had to do something called an honors thesis. And essentially, it's kind of like a PhD dissertation, but on the level of undergrad. So you do a project for a year with a faculty advisor, and you just and you get some work done. Maybe you get to publish something. So I was interested in some kind of algorithms and theory stuff. If you don't know what that is, it's not really important to you, but eventually I found a particular person that was offering a project, and the project I happened to work on was looking at sea ice concentrations in the Arctic Ocean over time and trying to discern any patterns there. And it's a very computer science-y type question because you got this big data set and then you start to work with it. So what do we actually do from there? At that point, I really loved the theory class that's being taught in pretty much every university in existence, which is usually called Intro to Theory of Computation. I run a channel called Easy Theory that's based off of that topic. If you search Easy Theory, you'll easily find it. Easy. And the thing is that I wanted to do something along those lines while I was doing my honors thesis. And the husband of that honors advisor that I was working for happened to be teaching the class and needed a grader at the time. I went to him and I told him, hey, I want to be your grader, and that ended up being totally good. I graded for him and everything, and then we started talking, him and I started talking. And it turned out that he was going to be the second committee member on my honors thesis defense. Whenever you have a dissertation / defense, thesis, whatever, you're going to have the primary chair of the whole thing, which was this first faculty advisor I mentioned, and some secondary or tertiary committee members. Because it was only an honors thesis, we only needed one extra, and it was him. Anyway, so I did my honors thesis defense, and then the new advisor started talking with me, and we started thinking up of new ideas to do at that point. So then the thing that was interesting at this point was I was in something called 4+1. So 4+1 is a way, kind of like a cheat code, to get a master's in 5 years total, including the undergrad. So effectively 1 additional year. And the way that this usually works, because there's so many requirements to get a master's, is that you have to do some grad classes in your undergrad. And I was enrolled in the grad class of this new advisor. And what came about as the result of that, I started talking with some other folks, including him, and I quickly realized that I wanted to do a PhD because I wanted to be an academic. I wanted to teach, I wanted to do research, all that kind of stuff. So in order to be an academic, you need to get a PhD, and I wanted to get that as soon as possible. It turned out that Arizona State University is one of those few places where you can get a PhD without a master's first. Most places, for better or for worse, depending on you, you have to get a master's first before you get a PhD. So what I did was, at the end of my last year, my senior year as an undergrad, I quit the 4+1 program to immediately switch into the PhD one. Well, since this was a switch, I needed to get approval from the head department chairs and my new advisor and some other folks too. The thing is that this was really quick timing, like on the order of like a week or 2 weeks or something. I don't even remember the details. But the thing is, I needed to get this done really quickly. And it worked because I happened to have a faculty advisor that really wanted to work with me. So if any of you want to get a PhD, I don't recommend it to most people, but if you do, it would immensely help if you have a faculty advisor who's already willing to work with you. If that's the case, then your application is going to be sent in and approved much more quickly. Now I am a PhD student at this point, and now I'm on a 4-year plus journey. So depending on the institution, it's going to take between 4 and 6 years. And of course, as I said, it's a case-by-case basis. It's just going to be different for every single person. Some people I know have taken 10 years and some have taken 4. I took about 4, which is about the minimum that you can do at Arizona State for the reason I'm going to talk about in a sec. The primary purpose of a PhD student is to do research, is to solve a particular problem or a set of problems and to publish research on that. That's the whole point of getting a PhD. But the problem is that every university in existence needs to run. It needs to support buildings. It needs to run classes. It needs to grade papers. So the carrot on a stick for PhD students is we can waive your tuition if you do some additional stuff for us. So the additional stuff usually is if you have a research stipend that comes from some grant funding that the advisor had that didn't apply to me, or what you can do is some TA work. I knew I wanted to be a teacher of some kind. That's one of the reasons to become an academic or a professor is you want to teach, and that's what I did. And what I did was I was either the instructor or a teaching assistant for all 8 semesters, not 8 years, 8 semesters of my PhD. And I taught sometimes in the summer, sometimes I taught in the fall and the spring. But effectively, because I was a TA, my tuition got waived, which is the deal that you get if you're a TA, a full-time TA. And the competition's fierce because Arizona State University is the largest school in the entire world, I think, or it's close to it. It's a very, very large school nonetheless. And there are graduate students all over the place at Arizona State, especially in computer science. It was huge. The PhD students get the top choice for being a TA, and the faculty advisors can give input, all that stuff. So I did a lot of TA work. I taught hundreds and hundreds of students when I was at Arizona State, and it was completely invaluable experience. But the thing that's annoying about Arizona State is that you have to take classes. So at Arizona State, you have to take 84 credit hours in total. A lot of those are research-based that are totally required, but a whole bunch of them are going to be, you have to take a certain amount of classes, which if you're a PhD student, you shouldn't have to do that. Your point of existence as a PhD student is to do research. Taking classes is going to take away from that. It wasn't a huge hindrance to me, but the thing is, if you are a PhD student and you have to take classes, try to pick classes that are relevant to your research. So I took a class on the probabilistic method, and that ended up being one of the chapters in my PhD dissertation, using stuff from that class. I did 3 independent studies based off of, two independent studies based off of something called complexity theory, so that I can learn independently because that class wasn't being offered. And that was tangentially related to my research. I took some classes that were totally irrelevant to my research because maybe it'll turn out to be useful one day. It hasn't yet, but hopefully it ends up being useful. Anyway, so I had to take a whole lot of classes, which is really, really annoying, but I did it anyway. Some universities, I think University of Toronto is one of them, many European universities, they forbid you from taking classes, or at least they don't have a requirement for it. And so if you have the requirement, if you have no requirement like that, please do not take any classes unless it's relevant. If it's relevant, please take it, because some of the faculty in their own research area are some of the smartest people you'll ever meet. In fact, I forgot one. One class that I took was a topics class offered by my advisor, and he's the world expert in that subject. And I was so lucky because it was the only time it's ever been offered. I offered it as an undergrad elective at a later point. It was invaluable to take a class from that because that's literally the research that I do. So it is super, super helpful. Typically what you do to pick a research topic though, so I keep going down here to tap my iPad screen so it stays on so I don't have to unlock it. When you pick a research topic, it's usually something that the professor's already working on. So you basically are just picking from the set of projects that the professor's already working on, and then you try to find your own place within that. And this is a total case-by-case thing. There's no one-size-fits-all thing, even in computer science. So most computer scientists, apart from theoreticians, which is what I am, try to stick into a lab, a research lab. So you have a bunch of students all working on projects, either separate or joint, depends. And you either join an existing project or you work on one that's tangentially related, and then you frequently, usually once a week, meet with the research group to discuss what's going on. And I actually worked with a research group at Arizona State that did that, but that wasn't the case for me because I actually hardly ever talked to any of the other students that my professor was supervising at the time. So it just really depends. You're not going to always be in a lab or always be by yourself. It just really depends on your area. And in fact, I have no idea what humanities or any other field does, or even math for that matter. It's just that you usually find your way. The professor usually knows what's going on. If they don't, you probably should talk to the head of the department or something. But anyway, so effectively I found a project that I wanted to work on. Now, the virtual requirement for every single PhD degree anywhere offered, although it obviously varies, is that you have to publish something. So whether it's in a conference or a journal or a workshop or something, you have to publish a certain amount of stuff to basically guarantee that your work actually means something and is relevant. So I published a few things, some things that are totally unrelated to my PhD dissertation whatsoever, and I may talk about that at some point. I did publish some stuff and that met the requirement. And of course, the advisor will know what areas, what conferences, what journals are relevant to the work that they're doing because they've published it before. So it just really depends. All right, so more about the PhD degree itself. So there are 3 additional things that you have to do pretty much everywhere. You have to do something called actually no, 4. So one of them is that you have to do a comprehensive exam. Again, that varies depending on the department. You have to do a prospectus. You have to do a defense and a dissertation. So let's talk about each of those. So the comprehensive exam, I'll just tell about mine, because even in math, it's totally unrelated. So in computer science, what we had to do was you form your committee, which consists of the chair, which is the advisor you've been working with, and usually 3 to 4 other people, usually in the department, but sometimes there are industry folks that want to join in, but usually people in the department that know the general area for which you're working in, not the specifics, but just the general area. And it's important to get the committee stuff straightened away because the number one pet peeve that I had during my dissertation was that I could have graduated early in 3.5 years, which was the minimum. But the problem was that I had to do a bunch of committee overheads, which is basically you have to administratively figure out times where the committee can all meet at the same time. And that is the hardest thing, I swear, in my entire PhD, is trying to fit a time that works for all my committee members. And it ended up being that I had to wait several more months to graduate because of not being able to find times. So let's go back to the comprehensive exam. So you formed your committee, and what you need to do is they will ask you questions. So it was written questions for the first phase of it. So written questions in the first phase, and then you have like a week or two to answer those questions back. And then at a later point, you do an oral defense based on those questions. So they ask you additional questions based off of the answers that you gave. And you have to pass both the written and the oral portions. And if you don't, then you will have to do the prospectus at some later point. The comprehensive exam at some later point. I passed both of them. But one of the things that I had trouble with was that I had a committee member who wasn't, let's just say, as cooperative as the rest of them. I'm not going to go into that. I'm not going to name names, but there was one committee member who was a bit of a pain to deal with, and then we eventually had to replace this person with another person who I started working with at the time and ended up being really, really useful as a committee member. So now let's talk about the prospectus/proposal. So this is usually a kind of long document, not really, that at most sane universities you will create at the beginning of your PhD research. And the basic idea is, here's an overview of the general research area, and here's some things that I want to investigate. So here's problem one that I want to investigate, and here's some reasons why it probably will work. Then here's project two, here's some reasons why it'll work, and here's some references for it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you also put a timeline for which you expect things to be done, et cetera, et cetera. But at Arizona State, you have to do the comprehensive exam first in order to do the proposal. And usually the proposal at Arizona State is done one semester or two before your defense, which means that you effectively have one semester or two to write your entire dissertation, which is obviously a big no-no. So what usually we do instead, and what I did, was I started writing parts of my dissertation as we went along throughout the years. So across those 4 years, I started to write little by little, just a little piece each day, in order to get something where I don't have to do a lot of work at the very end. And one additional thing about computer science in particular, this is not true of other fields, is that you can take the things that you published in those conferences and journals and just literally copy them and paste them as chapters in your dissertation. That's what I did, and that's what most people do in computer science. It's literally a copy and paste. It's not like the same ideas. It's literally copied and pasted. For some of the other chapters, that was not true, but for I think two of them, it was just a direct copy and paste. The proposal's usually like 20 pages, single-spaced, which is not really that long. It actually was kind of hard to fit it all into 20 pages. You may think, okay, 20 pages is a lot. It actually is pretty hard to fit everything in, even single-spaced. In fact, I even needed to play with the spacing a little bit. So you have to do a proposal defense in front of your committee. So we have the comprehensive exam, the written and oral portion. We now have the proposal defense, which is purely oral, and they ask questions and then you pass or fail. The chair of the whole thing, if they're competent, which is not always true, if they're competent, they will not let you in the room if they don't think you'll pass. So the vast majority of people pass. It's just when you either are just so terrible at presenting, which is hardly ever the case, or you have an incompetent PhD advisor, they will not let you in the room otherwise, but they let me in the room. And I passed my proposal defense. I think that was in either the fall or spring. It's one of those two. I think it was in the fall that I did my proposal. And of course, since the proposal is at Arizona State is so close to the dissertation defense, you kind of have to compress everything to, I'm gonna write this chapter in like a month, and that's usually not feasible, but you just say that you're gonna do that, even though you already have most of the work done. But anyway, so that's the proposal. And then now onto the big kahuna, which is the dissertation. So this is obviously going to depend on the department, but usually a dissertation is between 1 and 200 pages. And here's the structure. So usually you have several pages of just boilerplate stuff, like here's the title page, here's acknowledgements, here's a dedication, here's table of contents, just boilerplate stuff. And then you have the intro chapter. So intro chapter just introduces someone to the area, to the research that you're gonna do. Then you have some background as the second chapter, which is gonna go into some of the technical aspects. And of course, this is obviously gonna change depending on the department, but this is computer science we're talking about. So you have a background chapter, and then chapters 3 through 5 are going to be, or it depends, but you can have more or fewer, but it just depends. So usually you have 3 chapters on results. So you have like one problem dedicated to a chapter, another problem dedicated to another dedicated to another chapter. And then you have a conclusion chapter at the end, where you propose future work as also, and then references at the end. The tool that I use for that is LaTeX. So if you don't use LaTeX, you're missing out. LaTeX is the greatest tool for writing long documents like that to keep everything organized. It's a big learning curve, but it's the most useful thing I think I've ever learned outside of my own research area. So make sure to learn LaTeX if you are a PhD student. So the dissertation, so here's what happens. So you write your dissertation and you go back and forth with your advisor on fixing major things that might be wrong with it. So maybe like the formatting is wrong, or maybe you forgot a reference, or maybe you forgot this big important section of your paper, or maybe this definition doesn't make sense, or you misspelled your own name. Maybe that's probably important. Anyway, so you try to get your dissertation to some reasonably good state. It's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be perfect, obviously. So then you hold your big PhD dissertation defense, and usually, as what I said, this should be a celebration. So the celebration here is you invite anyone who wants to come see it. It's usually, not always, open to the public. So in fact, my family came and watched me give this thing. You dress up super nice, not like this, and you give a talk on your research for about 30 to 40 minutes or so. Again, this is going to vary widely. In fact, I've seen PhD dissertation defenses that the person talks for 2 hours before anything else happens, which is insane. Usually 30 to 40 minutes because the committee members have other things to do. This is not the only thing that they have on their agenda for the day. So you do that thing for 30, 40 minutes, and then the committee can ask any questions that they want, so any preliminary questions. And then after that, the questions open to the public, so anyone who's also in attendance can ask questions. And then the committee basically tries to grade you, supposedly on the quality of the answers that you give, as well as the quality of your presentation, as well as the quality of your dissertation document. So again, the advisor should not let you in the room if you are not likely to pass. And I believe you have to get a super majority of people saying yes in order to pass, but it's usually full pass. You give that talk, you answer all those questions, and then what happens is the public leaves the room. So it's just the committee members and you. They ask additional questions if needed. I don't think they asked me anything extra. And so then you leave the room. So it's just the committee inside the room where they deliberate. So they deliberate on like what needs fixing, what are the big important things that are needed to be fixed, if any, in the dissertation document. They all have a copy that they probably marked up themselves. and then they let you back in the room once they're done, and they let you know whether you passed or not. My advisor said congratulations, and I shook his hand. I shook all the committee members' hands, and that was the end of it. I was super stoked about that. My family made these really nice cupcakes that they brought to the Dissertation Defense. It was a really nice celebration, and then I think we had pizza afterwards, so which is pretty cool. Hopefully that was interesting. If you have any other questions about the PhD process, put them into the comments down below. I will obviously make more videos about all of the details of everything. I try to remember everything as good as I can remember it. Obviously, I'm going to leave out some details because it was a 4-year whole process. I didn't write everything down, but hopefully that was interesting. I will talk about at some point about that most people shouldn't get a PhD, but if you're in the process of getting a PhD, I hope this was interesting to you. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.